So welcome guys, welcome to this series of the general physiology. So in today's lecture we are going to discuss the homeostasis. So this is the lecture 9 of this series. So let's start the homeostasis. So in homeostasis there are two terms. First one is homeo, second one is stasis. So homeo means same and stasis means standing, and the meaning of standing is to maintain. Okay, to maintain the same. What we have to maintain the same? So we have to maintain the constant internal environment of the body. So what is the internal environment of the body? Okay, so internal environment of the body is the extracellular fluid in which the cell lives. So what is the extracellular fluid? So let's say this is a cell and there are some fluid inside that cell. We call it a cell inside the fluid. We call it intracellular fluid. Intra means inside, cellular means cell, and fluid means fluid. So cell fluid present inside the cell is called the intracellular fluid, and there are some other fluid which present outside that cell is we call it the extracellular fluid. Okay, extra means outside, cell means cellular means cell, and fluid means fluid. The fluid present outside the cell is called the extracellular fluid. So extracellular fluid is basically fluid present outside the cell. There are also other term that is called interstitial fluid. Okay, so let's take another cell here. So there are two cells, and there are some fluid present between these two cells. Okay, which is also present outside the cell. So between the cell, also outside the cell. So we call it the ICF. Sorry, ISF, that is interstitial fluid. Inter means between, stitial means cell, and fluid. So fluid present between the two cells is called as interstitial fluid. Done. Okay. So interstitial fluid is a part of a extracellular fluid. Done. So this is we have to tell you. So so the so there are the 19th century. There are the great biologist which is called as Claude Bernard. So he told us the importance of the internal environment, and so he gave the term to the internal environment called as milieu interior. So according to the Claude Bernard, the internal environment is called as a milieu interior. Okay. So Claude Bernard is also called as the father of modern physiology. Okay, and the homeostasis term was given by the Harvard professor Walter Cannon in 1930. Okay. So interstitial fluid is basically cell outside, that is extracellular fluid, which is in which the cell lives. So cell live in the extracellular fluid, the fluid outside the cell and constantly move throughout the body. Okay, so it is extracellular fluid is present outside the cell but inside the body. Okay, and it constantly move throughout the body. Okay, so any fluid which present outside the cell is called the extracellular fluid, and that is called the internal environment of the body. Done. So we have to maintain that fluid, that is extracellular fluid, that internal environment in the body is called constant. So that is called as, that process to maintain it constant is called as homeostasis. Okay, yes. So it is a fluid outside the cell and constantly moves throughout the body. It includes the blood, okay, which circulate in the vascular system. Okay, it present between the cell. The fluid present between the cell is called an interstitial fluid, and ECF contain the nutrient, iron, and all other substances necessary for the survival of the cell. So cell survive with the help of extracellular fluid. So extracellular fluid contain nutrient, iron, and all other necessary substances for the survival of the cell. Okay. So now tell me that extracellular fluid, which is called the internal environment of the body, does it include only the fluid? No, it includes blood. Anything which is present outside the cell inside the body is called as internal environment. It can be any. So we can say digestive system, we can say nervous system, we can say endocrine system. So these are also the internal environment which is present outside the cell. Okay. So normal healthy living have to depends on the maintenance of the constant internal environment within the physiological limit. Okay. So there are various physiological system in the body, like a digestive system, like an endocrine system, like a nervous system, like a locomotor system. So we have to maintain that we have to avoid the change in that physiological system. Okay, if there is any change in that physiological system, there is a development of the pathology, there is a development of the disease. So change in physiology is basically called as pathology. Okay, pathology is basically study of disease. Okay, so deviate beyond the set limit. Body suffer from the malfunction or dysfunction. Therefore, the ultimate goal of the organism to maintain the maintenance of the internal environment within the state limit. The concept of homeostasis forms the basis of the physiology because it explained. So homeostasis is the basics of physiology because it maintain why we have to maintain the constant internal environment, and what happen if there is a deviation in that normal range. Okay, and it also told us how to brought back to the normal. Okay. So understanding the concept of homeostasis also form the basis of clinical diagnostic procedure. For example, increased body temperature beyond the normal range, as in the case of fever, indicate that something is wrong or heat in the heat production or the heat loss mechanism in the body. Okay. So normal range in case of fever, increased body temperature in the normal range in case of fever. So indicates something wrong with the heat production or the heat loss mechanism of the body. So it induces physician to go through the diagnostic proceeding and decide the treatment. Okay, to decide the treatment and to go to the diagnostic procedure, homeostasis is important. Okay, for the functioning of homeostasis system. So how the homeostasis system functions? So suppose there are any change in that particular system or particular internal environment in the body, then there are some detectors or sensors present in the body that detect the change. Okay, and that change, that detection, that signal will send to the integrating center. Okay, there are some center which is the integrating center. Okay. Okay, that integrating center immediately send information to the effector, and effector either accelerate or inhibit the activity and normalcy is restored. Okay, so this is basics. We can say mechanism of the homeostatic system, how it can function. Okay, so role of various systems of the body in the homeostasis. Okay, so role of homeostasis of the body in homeostasis. So pH of the ECS has to be maintained at the critical value of 7.4. Okay, so blood also include in the ECF, extracellular fluid. So pH of blood is 7.4. So pH of ECF is also a 7.4. The tissue cannot survive if it is altered. Thus, the decrease in pH is acidosis and increase in pH is alkalosis. Affect the tissue markedly. The respiratory system, blood and kidney help in the regulation of pH. Okay. When there is a change in the pH, that is 7.4, the tissue cannot survive. If there is a decrease in the pH, we call it acidosis, means there are the increase in the acidic condition. If there is a increase in the pH, we call it alkalosis. Hence, there is an increase in the alkaline condition. Okay. And the pH is regulated by the respiratory system, blood, kidney, and second one is the body temperature. Body temperature is regulated by the hypothalamus. Okay. Okay. Hypothalamus is a part of the endocrine system. Okay. We will discuss in the further lectures. So the normal body temperature is 37.5 degree. Increase or decrease in this temperature alter the metabolic activity of the cell. The skin, respiratory system, digestive system, excretory system, and skeletal, muscle, and nervous systems are involved in the maintaining the normal temperature within the normal limit. Okay. So we are seeing how different systems in the body are contribute to maintain the constant internal environment, contribute to maintain the homeostasis. Okay. So body temperature is maintained by the skin, respiratory system, digestive system, excretory system, and skeletal muscle and nervous system. Okay. So adequate amount of nutrient must be supplied to the cell. Okay, nutrients are essential for the various activity of the cell and the growth of the tissue. Okay, for the activity of cell and growth of the tissue, nutrients are required to the cell. The substance also from the source of energy required for various activity of the cell. Nutrient must be digested, absorbed into the body, and supported to the cell, supplied to the cell. So digestive system and circulatory system play a major role in the supply of the nutrient. So digestive system basically digests fluid, absorb nutrient, and through circulatory system there is a deposition, there is a assimilation, there is a transportation of the nutrient to the every part of the body. Okay, so adequate amount of oxygen should be made available to the cell for the metabolism of the nutrient. There should be adequate amount of adequate amount of oxygen should be made available to the cell for the metabolism of the nutrient. Okay, so we have seen that for the respiration, for production of energy, we require oxygen. Okay, simultaneously the carbon dioxide and the other metabolic product as a in the process of energy production, there is a formation of carbon dioxide. So this carbon dioxide is toxic to the tissue, and this carbon dioxide should be removed from the tissue, must be removed. Respiratory system is a concern of supply of oxygen and the removal of carbon dioxide. This function of supply of oxygen and removal of carbon dioxide was done by the respiratory system. Kidney and other excretory organs involved in the excretion of the waste product. Okay, so these are all are the basic things. Okay, these all are the basic things. Many hormones essential for the maintenance, metabolism of the nutrient and all other substance necessary for the cell. Hormone are to be synthesized and released from the endocrine gland in the appropriate quantity, and this hormone must act on the body cell appropriately, otherwise lead to the abnormal signs and symptoms. So water and electrolyte balance should be maintained optimally. Water contained in the body should be maintained. Okay, electrolyte balance also should. Otherwise, it lead to dehydration. When there is a loss of water, there is a dehydration or water toxicity in case of the when there is a excessive intake of water. Okay, and alternation in the osmolarity of the body fluid. So kidney, skin, salivary gland, and GIT take care of this. Kidney, skin, salivary gland, and GIT take care of the water consumption. Okay, all of these functions, the blood which form the major part of the internal environment must be normal. It should contain the required number of red blood cells and adequate amount of plasma. Okay, with normal composition. Only then it can transport the nutritive systems, respiratory gases, metabolic, and all other product. Skeletal muscles are involved in the homeostasis. These systems help in the organism to move around in the search of fluid. So skeletal muscle are the voluntary muscles in our body. Okay, so they are responsible for the locomotion. They are responsible for locomotion. Okay, locomotion means to change the motion, to change the location. Okay, the process of change of location of an organism is called as locomotion. Okay, move around in the search of food. We have to change the location. It also helps in to protect the organism from the adverse surroundings, thus prevent the damage or destruction. Okay, to protect ourselves, we need skeletal muscles. Okay, CNS, which include brain and spinal cord. Okay, two main things included in the CNS are the brain and spinal cord. Okay, also play important role in the homeostasis. Sensory system detect the state of the body and surrounding. Brain integrate and interpret the pros and cons of this information and command body to act accordingly through. So, sensory system, it gets stimuli, it get some message from external environment. Okay, so our brain integrate and interpret the pros and cons of this information and command the body accordingly. Okay, motor system, so that the body can avoid the damage. Okay, ANS regulate all the vegetative functions of the body, essential for the homeostasis. Vegetative function means involuntary functions, which are not in our we can say control. Okay, so the autonomic nervous system control all these functions. Examples are the we can say movement of the small intestine. These are not in our control of the body, essential for the homeostasis. So this control is maintained by ANS, autonomic nervous system. So we have discussed the components of the homeostatic system. There are some components of the homeostatic system. So when there is a deviation in the normal functions in the normal physiological system, then there are some sensor which detect the change. Then this sensor sends signal to the control center. This control center send information to the effector. Effector directly do the action and it correct the change and there is a normal C is restored. Okay, so components of the homeostatic system: sensor and detector which recognize the deviation, transmission of message to the control center, then transmission of information from control center to the effector from correction of the deviation. Okay, transmission of message or information may be an electrical process. This message transmission uh, can be occur with the help of electrical process. What is meant by electrical process? We can say in the form of impulse. Okay, in the form of impulse. Sorry, in the form of impulse. It can be in the form of impulse. Okay, so in the form of impulse. Okay, yes, they are given here. Through now or the chemical process, mainly in the form of hormone or blood vessel or body fluid. In chemical process, it is in the form of hormone through blood or body fluid, or in neural process, it is in the form of impulse or electrical process. Okay, effector which correct the deviation. Then, so transmission of message occur in two methods. First one is a neural method, which is occur in the form of impulse, and second one is a chemical method, which occur in the form of hormone through blood or body fluid. Done? Yes. Mechanism of the actions of homeostatic system. So how homeostatic system acts. Okay, how homeostatic system act. Homeostatic mechanism is the body responsible for maintaining the normalcy of its body system. Whenever there is a change in the behavioral pattern of any system, whenever there is a change in the system, effector brings back the normalcy either by inhibiting or reversing the change. It can inhibit or reversing the change or by supporting or accelerating the change. Okay, depending upon the requirement of the situation, this is achieved by the feedback signal. Okay, depending upon the requirement of the situation, this is achieved by the feedback signal. So we have discussed that effector inhibit the change to restore the normalcy, to maintain the normalcy. Effector itself, that is a treat the change. Okay, it treat the change. Okay, okay. So the method by which it treat the change, it destroy the change. That method is this occur in the form of feedback signal. Okay, this occur in the form of feedback signal, and there are two type of feedback signal. First one is inhibiting or reversing the change. Okay, it can either inhibit or reverse the change, or second one, it can either support or accelerate the change. Okay, so this is a feedback signal. So this feedback signal is of two types. First one is a negative feedback. First one is a negative feedback, and second one, it is a positive feedback. Okay, in negative feedback there is an inhibition or reversion of the change. Okay, they are inhibiting or reversing the change, and in positive feedback there is a supporting or accelerating the change. It support or accelerate the change in positive feedback, it inhibit or reverse the change in negative feedback. Done? Yes, let's move forward. These all are given here. Feedback process is the in which some proportion of the output signals stream is passed back to the input. This is done more intentionally in order to control the behavioral pattern of the system. So whenever there is any change occur, system person take two types of feedback. There are two types of feedback. First one is a negative feedback. Second one is a positive feedback. So in negative feedback, effector which treat the change. Okay, which treat the change. First one is a negative feedback. They either inhibit or reverse the change. Inhibit, or reverse the change. Okay, inhibit or reverse the change. Arrange the change, inhibit the change, or reverse the direction of a change. Okay, reverse the direction of a change. Then, after receiving a message, effector send negative feedback signal back to the system. Okay. So after receiving the change to the effector, okay, to the effector, they are send negative feedback signal back to the system. Now the system stabilizes its own functions and make attempt to maintain the homeostasis. So in negative feedback mechanism, effector send negative feedback. In this negative feedback, it either inhibit or reverse the change and maintain the homeostasis. So let's see the example of negative feedback. Let's see the example of negative feedback. So let's see first positive feedback. Okay, positive feedback is one to which system react in such a way to increase the intensity of the change. Okay, it increase the intensity of the change. It accelerate or increase the intensity of the change. Increase the intensity of the change. Okay, in the same direction. Okay, positive feedback is less common than the negative feedback. It is the less negative feedback is the most common. Positive feedback is the less common. However, it has its own significance, particularly during the emergency condition. So the main characteristics of the positive feedback is emergency condition. It occur in emergency condition. Okay, it occurs in emergency condition. One of the positive feedback occur during the blood clotting. Blood clotting is necessary to arrest the bleeding during the injury and occur in these three stages. So let's see the examples are the one by one. First, let's see the examples of the negative feedback. So negative feedback mechanism. First mechanism is a first mechanism which are maintain the homeostasis through negative feedback is there is a secretion of thyroxine. Secretion of thyroxine. So in endocrine system there are some gland. Okay, there are some gland. We call it a thyroid gland. Okay, we secrete two hormone. First one is a thyroxine. Second one is a TSH. That is a thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, so this thyroxine hormone is basically the secretion of this thyroxine hormone from thyroid gland is basically maintained by TSH. Okay, secretion is maintained by TSH. Okay, when there is an increase in TSH, there is an increase in thyroxine. When there is a decrease in TSH, there is a decrease in thyroxine. Okay, so normal level of thyroxine, there is no deviation. Normal level of thyroxine is maintained. When there is an increase in thyroxine level, okay, when there is an increase in thyroxine level, why why there is increase in thyroxine level? Because of the increase in TSH secretion. Okay, when there is a more secretion of TSH, there is a more secretion, there will be the more secretion of thyroxine. So to bring this increased secretion of thyroxine to the normal level, to bring that increased secretion of thyroxine to normal level, we have to inhibit the TSH secretion. So due to the inhibition of TSH secretion, there is a decrease in secretion of thyroxine, and the normal level of thyroxine will be maintained. Second one is when there is a decrease in secretion of thyroxine, it was occurred due to the decreased secretion of TSH. Okay, so we have to stimulate the TSH secretion due to the increase, so that there will be more secretion of thyroxine, increased secretion of thyroxine, and the normalcy of the thyroxine level is maintained. So this is the examples of the negative feedback mechanism. Okay. Second examples of the negative feedback mechanisms are. So let's move toward the second example of the negative feedback. That is to maintain the normal body water content. Okay. So when there is a normal body water content, there is a no deviation. There will be the normalcy restored. Okay. Okay. So when there is decreased body content. Okay. When there is a decrease in the body content, so effector sends signal to consume more water. So there will be the thirst. There is a sensation of thirst to the person, so person will drink water and there is increase in intake and normal content is restored. When the other method is a stimulation of osmoreceptor of hypothalamus. So hypothalamus is a part of the endocrine system, okay, which maintain the water and body temperature. So due to the decrease in the body water content, there is a stimulation of osmoreceptor in hypothalamus. So hypothalamus increase the secretion of ADH from posterior pituitary. Okay, from posterior pituitary gland, there is a secretion of one hormone that is called as ADH, and this ADH increase the water retention by kidney. Okay, so there will be this ADH hormone is called as antidiuretic hormone. The function of this ADH hormone is to inhibit the water loss through the excretion. Okay. So increase in the water retention by kidney. So there will be the less urine formation. Okay, so there is a less water loss through the body, through the kidney. So there is a normal water content in the body is restored. Second example is increased body water content. There is a no thirst, there is a decrease in the water intake, and the normal water content is restored. Second is a no stimulation of phosphoreceptor in hypothalamus, decrease in the ADH secretion, and water retention is decreases. So there is a more excretion of water through the kidney. So there is a loss of water from the body. So this increased water content will be back to the normal water content. Okay. Let's see the example of a positive feedback mechanism. First one is a blood clotting. Okay. So there are some bleeding occur through the injury of the blood vessel. Okay. Okay. So formation of prothrombin activator. So there will be the formation of prothrombin activator. So prothrombin activate. Prothrombin will converted into thrombin, and thrombin convert fibrinogen into fibrin, and this fibrin from the thread-like structure, which is called as a clot. Okay, and there will be the stoppage of bleeding. So let's discuss here. Three stages of the blood clotting are formation of prothrombin activator. The inactivated prothrombin is activated with the help of prothrombin activator, and this prothrombin will be converted to thrombin, and this thrombin will convert the fibrinogen into fibrin. So fibrin from thread-like structure, which is called as clot. Okay, which is called as clot, and this clot will be responsible for stoppage of bleeding. Okay, so this is all about it. And second example of the positive feedback mechanism is during the delivery of the baby. So when there is the onset of labor, so meaning of labor is there is a pain sensation during the delivery of the baby. Okay, pain sensation during the delivery of the baby is called as a labor. So when there is an increase in the pain sensation during the delivery of the baby, there will be the increase in the contraction of uterus. Okay, so the movement of due to the contraction of uterus, there is a movement of fetus to the cervix. So there is a dilation of cervix. Okay, so movement of fetus through the cervix. So stimulation of receptor in the cervix. Okay, so discharge of impulse from the receptor and transmission of impulse to the hypothalamus. This impulse will transfer to the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus secrete one hormone called as oxytocin, and this oxytocin is responsible for the contraction of uterine muscle. Okay. So this is examples of positive feedback mechanism. So the delivery of the baby will occur due to the contraction of uterus. Okay, so this oxytocin is responsible for the contraction of uterus. So this is example of the positive feedback mechanism. So that is all about the homeostasis. Okay, please like, share, and subscribe the channel. Okay. Thank you. Done. Okay.